Listen up. Here's a story about a little guy that lives in a blue world. And all day and all night, everything he sees is just blue, like him, inside and outside. Blue his house, with a blue little window, and a blue Corvette. And everything is blue for him, and himself, and everybody around, because he ain't got nobody to listen to. What's up, everybody, and welcome back to Sounds Good Makes Sense, a discussion show for the World of Warcraft player and so on. My name is Devilor, and today I want to try to at least contribute somewhat to the ongoing discussions about accessibility, especially with the recent announcements around like add-ons and the one-button rotation thing coming to World of Warcraft. I want to start by saying I am not what I would consider an expert on the subject matter of accessibility. But I have had the ability to work with and talk to and learn from a lot of people who are experts in the subject matter, and also have been able to assist with a lot of things in the past, both at Blizzard and elsewhere, in terms of trying to understand how to make a game more accessible to somebody and how to make sure they're still enjoying it and having fun in the process. And this has been coming up a lot in the WoW community recently. Again, like I mentioned, with the whole one-button rotation thing coming in, a lot of people have been like, oh, this is an accessibility feature. And that has prompted a lot of discussion surrounding accessibility in World of Warcraft and other video games. And I've seen a lot of like just generally weird or uninformed takes coming from people. So I thought it would be worthwhile to take some time and try to express at least how I look towards accessibility in video games and the value of accessibility in games and the ways to go about accomplishing it that don't take away or take away as little from the gameplay as possible. Now, obviously, you can probably tell I consider accessibility to be super important. And to me, that just kind of comes down to this core understanding of I love video games and I love when other people get to enjoy video games. So when games can be enjoyed by more people, I consider that a good thing. I like to be able to say to my friends and so on, hey, this game is great, you should play it, and not have their response be, I'd love to play it, but I can't because X and Y reason that ultimately don't actually have that much to do with the gameplay. It's just how the game is built. So to me, accessibility is something that it should be considered very important. It should be something that game developers strive to make a core central concept when they're developing a game, just because even if you just get down to like, if you be as cynical as possible with it, the more people that can play your game, the more people are likely to purchase it or spend money on it or whatever else is going on with your game, to which means that you then make additional profits. You can make more video games. But beyond even that cynical take, like games are fun. I want people to be able to enjoy games and enjoy playing them. So to me, I consider accessibility to be incredibly important. And it's unfortunate that accessibility has gotten, at least in some circles, gotten some pretty negative connotations attached to it over the course of the last several years, as more and more game developers are starting to think about accessibility more when they're creating games. And some of that is just people being weird and gatekeepy and getting upset when someone can enjoy their video game no, this is mine, you can't have it. Like that's weird. I'm not going to spend too much time talking about that. Let's just call that weird and move on. I think there's definitely a lot of people that are like that, but I think there's also a case where a lot of accessibility features or things that are called accessibility features have been put into games that kind of just made everything worse, oftentimes even for the people that they were ostensibly being created for in the first place, to where I think a lot of players aren't upset at the concept of accessibility. They're just worried that when a developer puts something for accessibility in their video game, it's going to change their own experience as a result. So let's start by just kind of establishing what the purpose of accessibility features in games is. It's the sort of thing that, like, yeah, you're probably thinking, well, it's obvious, right? So that more people can play the game. But like that's an important thing to set. To me, the core purpose of an accessibility feature in a video game is to make your game enjoyable by as many players as possible. And there's two very important terms that I just used in that sentence that I think really carry a lot of the philosophy forward and the way that I think about this stuff going forward. One is enjoyable, and the other is as possible. See, when you make changes or add features to your game in the name of accessibility, it's important to start by thinking, is this still going to result in a fun experience for the person who is using it? for the person that this is being created to assist them with their ability to enjoy the game. A lot of times, I think a lot of arguments on the internet sort of boil down to, well, I'm okay with accessibility features as long as it sucks, or as long as, like, if you turn it on, then there has to be some major penalty attached to it or something like that. And while I understand where that perspective comes in, the reality is if you make something for accessibility, or you do something in your game in the name of accessibility that results in the game sucking, like, you might as well have not done that, because all you've done is kind of pretend to do something for accessibility, but the result is that the people that you're making this for don't want to play your game anyway, because now it sucks. You see, and this is where it starts to get a little bit tricky sometimes. Anything done for accessibility in a game should still result in an experience that feels authentic to the game for the player who is using that feature, right? Like if you're making a game that is meant to be like a hardcore arena shooter, high fast reaction times and all that, competitive, super like fast paced, moving around, shooting stuff super fast all the time, and then you add a slow mode, there's probably a lot of the experience of your game that just falls apart at that point and results in something that isn't enjoyable by anyone, including the people that maybe didn't want to play a fast-paced arena shooter. One big trend I've noticed from a lot of the discussions that I've seen where people are arguing in favor of accessibility, as people who would utilize that accessibility, it's because they want to be able to play that game. It's right. Like they're not asking for this game to be more accessible because they want to play some weird hobbled down version of it. No, they want to be able to play that game and enjoy it. Whatever it is about your game is attractive to that player, and thus they want to be able to enjoy that game more. They just need something that's going to help that come to fruition. So the goal should ultimately be, wherever possible, to implement things in a way that stays true to the core gameplay. You don't eliminate that gameplay so that someone can just kind of waddle through. Make changes and updates and whatever else needs to be done, new features, etc., to your video game in such a way that the essence of your game is still intact, that the core of what makes your gameplay fun is still there. Because realistically, if someone's looking at your game and they say, that looks fun, I want to play it, it's because they want to play it, right? I feel like I'm harping on this particular subject right now, but like that's the core, and that's the important thing to think about. So when something removes a significant or important core portion of the gameplay to whatever it is that you've created, all you've done is make a worse version of your game. Now you might say, wait, but isn't eliminating gameplay pretty much exactly what the one button rotation thing in WoW is doing? And you're not entirely wrong, but I will come back to that. Now the dream, of course, is to find some solution that satisfies the accessibility needs of the section of the player base that you're trying to accommodate for without sacrificing anything. Like the game is still intact. It's still just as fun as it always was. Nothing has changed whatsoever for anyone else. This is just, we've made this nice little quality of life feature so that now these people can enjoy the game as well. That is the ideal situation. And sometimes that's absolutely possible. Sometimes not so much. At which point it's important to step back and say, what is the actual effect? Analyze what the total actual net result of this change is, and then make the decision of whether or not that's a worthwhile change to make, whether or not that's an okay sacrifice to make in the name of getting more people able to enjoy your video game. Because a lot of times, I think this happens a lot. People get super hung up on, well, this is going to be slightly easier now, or this other thing, you've made this change, and now this other thing over here, it's slightly different than it used to be. And oftentimes that will be the case. Like, no matter how simple an accessibility feature is, oftentimes there's going to be someone that's going to use it anyway, even if they don't necessarily need it. Like Fortnite, for example, has these like directional indicators that they added for where you heard a sound coming from. And now most people just have those on anyway, because being able to see on your screen an indicator of what direction a shot came from or whatever, where you heard something coming from, that is a extra advantage if you don't have than if you didn't have that. You can now get a more direct understanding. Oh, there was a shot. I didn't quite catch where it was from because I was spinning around or whatever. You can actually see like a note on the screen, or a thing pops up on the screen that says what direction that shot came from, so you can react to it a little bit better. That is absolutely something that has affected gameplay for a lot of players in Fortnite. But at the end of the day, the developers looked at that and said, yeah, if everyone turns this on, that's fine. Like, being able to analyze the exact angle from which you heard a shot isn't like so core to the gameplay of a battle royale. It's helpful, it's important. Like being able to get an idea of the general direction of where a shot was from is very useful. But you're not going to win a game because you heard a shot and you were able to tell, no, it's that direction exactly, instead of like somewhere in this range. Like it's not taking anyone from being a last place loser all the time to suddenly winning every single round that they play. And so ultimately the developers decided, yeah, that's fine. Everyone can turn this on. That's okay. It's not going to negatively impact the overall gameplay experience. Fortnite is not a game about hearing what direction shots came from. Fortnite is a game about gunplay and gathering things and general battle royale stuff. I'll use an example of something that I have a little bit more direct experience with. And that example is Metroid Dread speedrunning. I've been speedrunning Metroid Dread. I don't run it as much these days, but I used to speedrun Metroid Dread a lot. I spent a lot of time on stream. If you go back through my old videos here on YouTube, you'll find like tutorials and stuff and some of my runs from back when I was really doing a lot of speedrunning for Metroid Dread. But I still help out in the community from time to time, just like helping keep up with the speedrun.com leaderboard and so on. Anyway, that's all unimportant information. What's important to understand is that Metroid Dread is a game that allows you to shoot as fast as you push the button. Like your basic shot, if you push that button really fast, with limitations of the Switch hardware, it actually only ends up being a max of like 30 shots per second, but that's still a lot. And if you push the button really fast, you can shoot every time you push that button. And so there's been this ongoing debate in the Metroid Dread community about the use of turbo controllers. Currently, they are allowed to be used on the speedrun.com leaderboards. If you have a turbo controller, you can use that. And turbo, if you're unfamiliar, is just a function that instead of having to mash the button like crazy, you just hold the button down and the controller will automatically send a bunch of shoot inputs for you. So you're just shooting like crazy, even though you're only pressing the button and holding it down. And as you can probably imagine, this has led to a pretty heated debate in the Dread community over the several years that I've been involved with it. Because obviously holding down a button is different than mashing it like crazy. And there is an element of skill and physical ability involved in being able to press that button super fast. And there's a couple of things throughout the run where it does have something of an effect. Like naturally, I'm not going to go into all the details, but if you are able to mash like crazy, you can shave off like a few minutes of your time overall. And it's a game where runs are usually around an hour to an hour and a half, depending on what category you're doing. So this does save time in your speed run, being able to shoot super fast. So there are a lot of people on both sides of the debate. People are like, yeah, just let me use this button so that I can shoot really fast. And people are like, but mashing is a skill and I want to be able to, I'm good at this skill, so I want to be able to use that skill. And I'm not going to try to summarize like every single thought and opinion because there's a lot of them. This is a very, very surprisingly nuanced subject the more that I've been involved in this discussion. But for me, what it boiled down to was looking at the way the speed runs go, looking at all of the skills that are involved in a Metroid Dread speed run. Being able to shoot fast is one of them, but it's only one of a ton. And it is not the thing that's going to save you the most time throughout your run. It's not like the difference between the world first run and being like 50th to 1,000th on the leaderboards is whether or not you're using a turbo controller. It's something that helps, but it isn't taking a bad speedrunner and making them a good speedrunner. So again, for me, my opinion in this whole thing, I looked at this and I said, okay, yes, there's all these skills that are involved, but button mashing isn't such a substantial one that it's okay to lose button mashing from the list of skills you need to develop to be a good Metroid Dread speedrunner, because there's so much else that's going on. Like just general movement throughout Dread is a big thing. Being able to get your character around, get Samus to jump around how you want her to is a thing. There's a lot of like very specific frame perfect tricks that you have to do. Like one of the biggest ones that's also a big time save. It saves you like 4 minutes in total. Requires you to do 4 frame perfect jumps and a melee in rapid succession to be able to pull it off. It's called Atom Skip. It's crazy. It's difficult. I hate it, but only because I'm bad at it. But to me, I was looking at this whole discussion. I'm saying, okay, yes, it does technically make things a little bit easier. And yes, the top runners are probably all going to want to use turbo controllers as a result, which is like $30 to get a decent one. But that's an okay loss for the sake of allowing people who either can't or don't want to, or who will literally injure themselves trying to push this button as soon as possible to be able to enjoy speedrunning this game. Like you're not you're not taking someone who is, you're not removing the core of the gameplay. Metroid Dread isn't a game about shooting fast. It's about moving around the environment, following your route, getting the upgrades, fighting the bosses. And yes, a couple of the boss fights can be made very slightly easier or faster by using a turbo controller if you can't button mash very fast. But it's not a big deal either way. And by the way, just as an aside, I actually, when I speedrun Dread, I don't use a turbo controller. I just mash really fast because I can just mash really fast. So that's the perspective that I'm coming from in this. This isn't me going, oh, it'll help me, so I want it. I don't use a turbo controller when I run Dread. To me, saying, yes, this is one of the skills that I have that does get me a slight edge against other runners, but I'm okay with losing that for the sake of letting other people have fun and letting other people play this game. That was kind of what it boiled down to for me. And I think that's just such an important step to take when you're thinking about, is this accessibility feature going to make the game easier for someone? Is this removing some aspect of gameplay? Is this like dumbing something down, or however you want to put it? Is that sacrifice okay? Like, how much does that actually matter? How big of a loss is this actually? Like, having a directional indicator that shows you what direction you heard a sound from on the screen, is that making something slightly easier? Yeah. Does it matter? Not really. It's not making it easier in a way that really changes that much. It's just making it easier for people for whom it does change a whole lot, who could not have been able to tell what direction that came from or whatever. Is being able to hold down a button instead of just mashing like crazy, making Metroid Dread speedrunning easier? Yes. Like, objectively, yes, it does make the run easier, but it's not changing the core of the gameplay so much that now it's just a snooze fest and there's nothing else that's important that you have to do. My point with all of this is just to say that sometimes an imperfect solution is still the correct choice. Sometimes something might not be an absolute clean, yeah, only the people that need this are going to benefit from it and no one else cares. Sometimes that's the case, but it isn't always. And a lot of times it's not. And it's okay for a developer to look at their game and say, yeah, you know what? We're actually okay with losing that little aspect of something because we don't think it's that important overall. The gameplay experience isn't so dramatically changed by having this option that lets people do something slightly easier that we're upset if it's something that everyone just starts using. For what it's worth, this is also a big part of why keeping accessibility in mind as you're creating your game in the first place is so important. Obviously, that's difficult for Blizzard to do at this point because the game's been out for 20 years. So until they invent time travel, they can't go back in time and be like, aha, we should have had one button rotation from the beginning or anything like that. But it's the sort of thing that when you are creating a game, if you're stopping to think about these things, or you're just educating yourself as a developer on the sorts of things that people who have certain disabilities or have certain restrictions or whatever else have to deal with, you might recognize some things earlier on than you would have otherwise. Like, one example that immediately comes to mind, you're like League of Legends, the team colors in League for the longest time were like blue and purple. And that's ridiculous. Like, nowadays you look at that and you go, why would you do that? And it's because they didn't think that maybe some people would have difficulty telling those two colors apart. But what that means is when you're making the thing in the first place, oftentimes you can just avoid these accessibility issues entirely by just being mindful about the sort of traps to fall into, or the accidents that can happen that you might not necessarily recognize immediately yourself, but if you know about them, you can change things for it. Another example I love to tell in this regard is actually really early on while I was at Blizzard, right after Warlords of Draenor came out. We were going through the Highmaul raid, and I was going through with a bunch of my friends, and we got to the Tectis fight. And there's a lot that goes on in Tectis. It's a very complicated fight, but the two mechanics that are most important to understand is that there are two circles that go on the ground. One is a big circle that you need everybody to stand in because you need to split the damage. And the other is a big circle that you do not want to stand in because you're just going to take a bunch of damage for no reason. And when that fight first came out, when Warlords of Draenor first came out, one of those circles was brown and the other one was orange. And a couple of people that I was raiding with at the time, who are still good friends of mine, they could not visually tell the difference. They have, I forget which form of colorblindness it is, but they could not tell the visual difference between the brown circle and the orange circle, to the extent that as we were progressing through like, they were just dying constantly. And they were like, I don't understand what's going on. I was in the circle. And we'd be like, you weren't supposed to be in the circle. And they'd be like, but we were supposed to be in the circle. One of them literally did not realize that there were two different abilities that was happening with these circles, because they looked the same to him. So we ended up doing things like calling out good circle, bad circle, good circle, bad circle throughout the fight, which then got extra complicated when there was two of them at the same time. So fortunately, I was able to, because I was at Blizzard at the time, I was able to go to the development team like the next day, and I was like, hey, by the way, people with this form of color blindness literally cannot see the difference on this fight. And the designer was like, oh crap. And they just changed it. Like, it was just something that they had not realized was a thing at the time. And I don't blame that designer too much myself, regardless, because like at the time, like this was, God, when was this? 2014, 2015? This was a while ago. There was just less knowledge around the industry at the time in terms of the effects of stuff like that. But that's what I mean. That's the core of what I'm getting back to here, is that as a developer is creating the game, if they keep these things in mind, they're able to avoid sort of stepping in these issues just by being more aware of the nature in which certain players can be challenged by certain things differently. But let's go ahead and talk about the WoW one button rotation and how that exists as an accessibility feature in the modern game. And the first thing that I want to say is that I don't expressly consider the one button rotation to purely be an accessibility feature. It's definitely the sort of thing that can help with people who need it. It can be the sort of thing that if you're someone who you just don't want to play the piano while you're playing your shaman, you want to be able to just push a button and go through your rotation that way, it can certainly help. But I don't think this is a feature that was purely implemented just to help out with that issue. I think a lot of why they're looking to put this in the game is because WoW is a game that's pretty complicated, and there's just going to be a lot of people who, even if they could be pushing all these different buttons themselves, will be perfectly happy to just sit back and go, yeah, let's just do one button because I'm going to enjoy the game more in that sense. This is a feature that, as I see it at the very least, is designed purely to simplify down a portion of the game that some people want to have simplified for this content and are okay with sacrificing throughput in order to do that. That is a choice that they are making independent of any accessibility reasons. It's just something that they're saying, yeah, I just kind of want to be able to do my couple of delves for the week. I just want to go out and do these world quests or whatever. I want to, I don't know, run through normal dungeons and not have to think about it so much. And that's all they really want to do. And they're okay with it being a lot easier to do their rotation as a result. They want to be able to watch Netflix while they're going through their normal dungeons. And that's fine. I don't have a problem with that whatsoever. It does mean that from an accessibility standpoint, it is one of those imperfect solutions. And again, it will definitely help a lot of people in that regard. But honestly, the cooldown manager is something that's probably more of a solution in this situation, because being able to keep track of those things a little bit easier and being able to show your most important buttons and know which ones you're going to push next, the rotation helper on top of that, that is more helpful in terms of accessibility than having the one button rotation with its extra GCD attached to it. I still like the feature. Like, WoW as a game at its core is a game with a ton of different content offerings. So it's okay if no one's going to want to use this for mythic rating at the top level. It's okay if no one's going to want to use this to push +10s. It's okay if no one's going to want to use this in arenas. That's all fine, because ultimately it's not for that section of the audience. It's a feature that you don't want to turn on for that. And it's not designed to help with the aspects of the gameplay where knowing all of your buttons and being able to keep all of that flowing is meant to be a core part of the gameplay. It's more of a WoW is trying to attract a very wide audience with all of its different content offerings, and trying to fix the issue of an overcomplicated rotation for the people that don't want to deal with it by removing a ton of abilities would be catastrophic for the people who do. So this is a good sort of like halfway point almost, in which it says, yeah, we have this complicated rotation. If you learn the complicated rotation, you will have a better overall result. But if that's just not what you want out of this game, here, have this feature, and you can still go and enjoy the parts of the game that you do want to enjoy, and you just don't have to deal with this other thing. I would still like to see some other changes made to help with the overall clutteredness of the game, but I've talked that to death already. Mostly it comes down to having buffs and procs and 12 different things that occur whenever you push a button, so that it's hard to understand what in its entirety some of your ability presses are even doing. That's, again, I've talked that subject to death already. We're not going to go back into it. I do, however, want to take a brief aside to talk about the concept of difficulty settings in games. And this is, again, we're kind of backing away from WoW a little bit here. In fact, a lot of this discussion and the learnings that I have about this topic came from a big debate that's been going on in the Souls-like community for a while, with the concept of, should Dark Souls essentially have difficulty settings? The Souls-like genre, and Dark Souls / FromSoft games in particular, the difficulty and the challenge of them is seen as a core element of the gameplay. It's like, this game is meant to be very hard, and if you're experiencing this and you are not being challenged by it, then you're not really experiencing the game at that point. So I think that's why a lot of people looked at that whole discussion and they were like, no, Dark Souls shouldn't have an easy mode, because then that's sidestepping the core element of the gameplay. But as I've been following this debate, it kicked off really big like a couple of years ago, and I was watching it pretty closely because I just found it fascinating, and I really wanted to learn from a lot of the different discussions that were happening. And there were two big learnings that stuck out to me that were coming from a lot of the people who were arguing in favor of some element of difficulty adjustment for Dark Souls. The first was simply that someone can still enjoy a challenging experience, even if it's not a challenge for someone else. Like, just because a game is just because a game is easy for you does not mean it's not hard for someone else. And if it's still a difficult challenge, and someone is still like, palms are sweaty when they get that boss down, and they're finally like, yes, I did it finally, and they're still getting that feeling and that experience of finally getting the boss down, it doesn't really matter if the boss was technically easier for them than it was for you when you also had that experience, as long as you're both still getting that resulting experience out of the gameplay. But secondly, and more importantly, in my opinion, one big thing that stuck out to me that I saw coming from a lot of people who were very, very focused on accessibility, was just the notion that difficulty isn't like, it's not like ordering your soft drink at a fast food place. It's not like, yes, I would like the king size difficulty, please. It's not as simple. Games are complicated. The idea of distilling down a game to easy and normal and hard is, honestly, especially for a game where difficulty is meant to be a core part of the experience, that's kind of oversimplifying things. I remember reading a series of tweets that I think was from a guy called Half Coordinated, who is he's a speedrunner. I think he actually works in accessibility now, but he only has full use out of one of his hands. And he's been speedrunning games for a long time, and I really enjoy watching his speedruns. And I remember seeing a series of tweets from him where he was basically saying, no, Dark Souls doesn't need a easy, normal, hard mode added to it, but what it could benefit from is a few other little tweaks here and there that would allow me to tailor that experience to still be difficult. And also, I think a few other things, if I remember correctly, that he was talking about was things like specific ways about how the UI works or whatever that made it difficult for him to play the game using a controller in the way that he typically does, to be able to do it with just one hand. So that's why I say it's not like ordering your size of drink at a fast food place. I look at difficulty these days more like, it's almost more like getting a tailored suit. Like if you go to a tailor and you're like, yes, I would like a suit, please. They're going to take all manner of measurements. Like I had one shirt. I'm not bougie enough to own a tailored suit. I have one shirt that doesn't fit anymore because I got fat. But I went and got it. It was a birthday present. I went and got it tailored. It was great. I had a great time with it. And they were doing things as in depth as like, what arm do you wear your watch on most of the time? Will make the cuff on that sleeve slightly larger so that you can wear your watch with it. Doing things like measuring like 3 different points across my torso, arm length, all of this other stuff. They make all these measurements because the shirt does not, like a just standard off the rack shirt is going to fit different people differently. And they were like, we want to make you a shirt that fits you exactly as you currently exist. And we've started to see more games take difficulty in that direction. One that just came out recently, Doom: The Dark Ages. The way that Dark Ages difficulty settings work, they still have the like, I forget the exact names off the top of my head, the like Hurt Me Plenty versus Nightmare difficulty. They still have those settings, but what those are is essentially just presets. And those presets control like a series of sliders where you can adjust things like how much health do the enemies have? How hard is it to land a parry? How fast are you moving all the time? Stuff like that. And so you can actually go well beyond nightmare difficulty in terms of difficulty, which is something that I didn't realize until later. I would have turned some things up if I had realized that at first. But you can actually make the game more or less difficult in very specific ways. You might be able to sit down and say, well, I don't have a problem with the parry mechanic. I don't have a problem with the speed at which I'm moving. But enemies take just a little bit too long to die for me, and I'm not having fun as a result of that. So I'm going to take enemies from 100% health to 90% health, and now I'm having more fun. Or maybe you're like, yeah, make me as fast as possible, give the enemies as much health as you possibly can, make them do a ton of damage to me. That's all fine. But this parry mechanic is, I just can't land it at the right time. I can't get the timing right on this. So let me make the parry a little bit easier, but then bump up the difficulty everywhere else to counteract that. And I would love to see more games start to take that approach to difficulty settings. Instead of like sticking everyone with easy, normal, hard, let me go in and say, I'm fine with this game being difficult in these ways, but this one specific thing is bothering me and I'm not good at it. And as a result, I am not having a good time with this. It will still be a challenge for me if I bump that down, and maybe I'll even turn some other stuff up in the process. It'll still be a challenge. I will still get that experience of fighting and defeating a challenging boss and so on. But it allows it to tailor it more to my particular, what I particularly find challenging. Because while yes, difficulty is in a sense a form of accessibility, and making a game easier means more people can play it, there are ways to do that that don't result in them losing the final experience that you're actually creating your game to be able to deliver. If the core of your game is like dodging and parrying and all of that, you can make adjustments in the difficulty. Like maybe Dark Souls, for example, wouldn't want the dodging and parrying to be made any easier, but maybe they'd be okay with you saying, yeah, I get a few more summons than you get in your runs, or getting souls is a little bit easier for me so that way I can level my stuff up faster and be able to take these things on a little bit better. There are ways that games like a Souls-like can approach that without sacrificing the core of what they are as a game. Now, all that said, the last point that I want to make in this video, which is already it's either very long or I'm going to have to do a lot of editing. I'm actually not sure. But the last point that I want to make in this video is that it's okay for not every game to be for everyone. Like, games are, as I've said repeatedly on this channel, a subjective art form. They are something that what one person finds fun and enjoyable and engaging, another person might not. So naturally, just no matter what, not every game is going to be for everyone just out of the gate, because there's just going to be people who do or do not like things in different ways. It is okay as a result for a game to be something that you look at and you say, I'd be interested in running around in Elden Ring, but I really don't want to deal with the slower tactical dodging and parrying combat. I really don't want to deal with getting lost and dying and losing all my souls and having to go back and get them. So that game is just not for me. That's okay. That is a perfectly fine situation for the game to exist in. There doesn't need to be a don't lose your souls when you die option in Dark Souls and stuff like that. It just sucks when the reason that someone can't enjoy a game that they're otherwise very excited for is not important. It's not something that would have made the game any worse for anyone else, and would have still stuck to the core of what that game actually is. And this just brings me right back around to the thing that I said at the start of this video, which was the core and the point of an accessibility feature should be and needs to be to make the game enjoyable for as many people as possible, to make the core of what that game is something that as many people as would be interested in playing that game will enjoy. And also, like I said at the start of the video again, this is something that I feel like I'm still learning on as well. So please don't take this as like my accessibility manifesto of like, this is how it should be and always should be. There is every possibility that I will have some thoughts and opinions that change as I continue to learn more about this subject. That's just kind of where I'm at right now. And since there's been so much of this discussion in the WoW community recently, I felt it was worth bringing that to light and sort of opening that up a little bit. So again, I've said this a lot recently. I consider all of these videos to be part of a discussion. If you have any thoughts or opinions or comments yourself, if there's anything you're like, wow, you're just way off on this, that's not how that works at all, or anything along those lines, please do leave a comment. I do read every single comment that comes in. I don't always get a chance to respond to all of them, but I do. In fact, I don't get a chance to respond to most of them, but I do read every comment that comes in. And they help me to create more content and consider more topics for discussion in the future. So please do keep those comments rolling in. And that's where I'm going to wrap it up for today. Thanks again so much, everyone, for watching. I didn't get to questions this week. Hopefully next week I can get some more questions in. Again, if you have questions, please do leave a comment below. I will go through previous videos as well for next week to check for any questions that I may have missed. But yeah, we're going to wrap that up. Thank you so much, everyone, for watching. And thank you once again to all of my patrons. You guys are really the ones that are keeping this channel going. So thank you so much. If you're interested in checking out my Patreon, if you like what I'm doing here, that's patreon.com/Devilor. There's a few fun little perks that you get as a result of that. But the biggest perk is that you get to know that it helps me keep doing this. So thank you all so much for all of the support. I have some potential new merch options coming in soon. I'm waiting on a sample to come in. Keep an eye on devilor.com for that. And watch my Twitch streams. I don't know, twitch.tv/Devilor. I'm thinking about some stuff that will allow me to start streaming on YouTube again soon, but that's something that I have to put some more research into and figure out exactly how I want to go about it. So I'm a little teased, but I don't want to talk too much about it just yet because I'm still making decisions myself. Anyway, that's it from me. Thanks again so much for watching, everyone, and I'll see you later.